From my perspective, here I am sitting in prep school with, you went to school with pretty interesting people of fairly high rank, and they said you had to give all that up, and I would give up my opportunity to move forward, and I thought they were crazy. And to make it even more interesting is that I arrived in Trinidad, and they, instead of sending me to prep school in America, they said, no, it's good for you to go to the local high school in Wilson, North Carolina.
Right.
And we arrived in Wilson that year on the day of integration.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode, I speak with community leader, business consultant, and innovator Christopher Campbell. Raised in Trinidad, Christopher was educated in an English prep school before the family moved to the United States when he was 16. He says the transition to a new country and culture was made a little easier by having a British accent and a Beatles haircut, both very popular in 1966. A successful career in telecommunications and consulting allowed Christopher to pursue his passion to impact the world around him. He was an award-winning leader with the Boy Scouts, served on various boards, and was a founder of St. Peter's Anglican Cathedral, and is a longtime Rotarian. He also put his love for sports to good use. He and his wife Tina worked together, managing marketing and sponsorships for a NASCAR team, and helped convince the British Olympic team to train in Tallahassee for the 1996 Games in Atlanta. Christopher is probably best known as the founder of the Tallahassee Quarterback Club Foundation, which created the Bolitnikov Award, honoring the best receiver in college football, and provides scholarships to local players. He remains focused on finding ways to give back to the community and serve others. We began by talking about his early years.
Right. I was in early school in Trinidad. I was 10 years old. What happens with the colonial families is that they send their children back to prep school in England, which I did. I went when I was 10 years old. But before that, I lived, we had an estate, and we had a good life, and I spent a lot of time in the jungle. I mean, that's the way life was. And I had my own donkey, and I went whatever I wanted to do. And we were primarily business was flowers. We grew flowers in mass, and we shipped them out by the container to the United States and to England. So I'm the original flower child.
Wow. So when you say you had a donkey and you could do anything you wanted in the jungle, what kind of things would you do?
Well, it's very interesting. You have this wonderful valley that has all kinds of things in it, and you can take off in the morning and go off, and I can go play with the guppies, or I can go pick fruit or go up the mountain. But that's the estate. We lived obviously downtown, outside of Port of Spain, which is the capital of Trinidad.
Okay, so going to prep school back in England was a pretty big change in your lifestyle, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just you're going from a very agricultural life. That was my father was an agronomist, which is a fancy name for a farmer. And so I lived in that world. And then you go to prep school, which is pretty formal and everything you read about in the books or the movies. And I started off with if you saw the Chiquita Banana commercial, that's the way I spoke. Obviously, in prep school, that doesn't cut it. So you have to learn the Queen's English. And we did, and but that's a very interesting life, the prep school life. I loved it. It was a great life. I was very competitive in sports and so forth. But I mean, the kind of thing you live with in the winter, they don't think too much of heat, so you lived in dorms and the windows were open no matter what the temperature was. So it's
right. So the only thing I have to relate to that is watching The Crown and where Prince Philip went.
That's
is that
exactly
the kind of thing?
Yes, exactly right. He went to Gordonston,
Okay.
and I went to Millfield. Comparable, and you have to know how to get around. I mean, you have to be able self-sufficient and tough, and so I loved it. I lived it, and it was. He didn't do so well.
No, he didn't enjoy it as much, at least from the show.
Yeah.
So did you get to go home on holidays or summers or anything?
That's a great question. The way it works in a colonial system like that is, first of all, in those days, it took 2 days to fly from England to Trinidad.
Wow.
Okay? And what happened, I had 2 separate years that I didn't go back to Trinidad. I didn't see my family. And the way that is that colonial families will buy a beautiful estate, and then they will solicit for people like myself and my sister, and you'd go stay with them during the holidays. So in Easter, for a month, you'd go, or in the summer, for 2.5 months, you'd go live with this family.
Yeah, it seems so foreign, that whole concept. But I guess if that's the way you're raised, those are your expectations, it's just the next step of your life, right?
Right, and you begin to live into it. You begin to embrace that whole thing of being a part of a prep school and playing sports for them. And I was very fortunate. I was in the prep school system. The officers, the student officers, called prefects, and I had made my way up, and I was actually in line to be head boy at that school, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
And then when my parents said no, they had already left Trinidad. What had happened was my father, as I said, was an agronomist. He was a world authority on tropical crops. And they were pioneers in the sense that she had lived all her life in Trinidad for multi-generations, and they were going to give all that up to come to America. And so I'm ever blessed for them that they made such a bold decision to come to the United States.
Right.
Then from my perspective, here I am sitting in prep school with, you went to school with pretty interesting people of fairly high rank, and they said you had to give all that up. And I would give up my opportunity to move forward, and I thought they were crazy. Mm. And to make it even more interesting is that I arrived in Trinidad, and they, instead of sending me to prep school in America, they said, no, it's good for you to go to the local high school in Wilson, North Carolina.
Right.
And we arrived in Wilson that year on the day of integration.
I read that your first day there was the first day of integration in the schools.
Correct. And they'd integrated 3 high schools together.
Wow. So how did that go?
Well, it was dramatically different. I mean, the people that I was at school in England are very different. It was the very best thing that ever happened to me. It was a great experience, a little tough culturally. It was a dramatic change. But I had, you learned to get on with all walks of life, people that you had never associated with, but now it changed, and it was the very best thing I could do. It was also, from an academic point of view, schools in England, whenever you had a question or a quiz or essay, everything was an essay. Mm. So I had to learn how to take
like multiple choice.
Multiple choice and fill in the blank. Had no idea.
So that's an American thing, the multiple choice.
Yeah, we don't have that. I think it's beginning to be used more and more through the world, but in that time, it was a dramatic difference.
Right. Yeah. So I'm interested how you adjusted and how you were received being different, because coming in that situation, that's tough for the kids in those communities to figure out how they're going to live together and, go to school together and get along and all that. But you have to get used to Americans overall because you're coming from a completely different situation. And now you've been put right in the middle of the racial tensions of the integration. So how did you deal with all that at one time?
Well, it was very interesting. I had an advantage. Obviously, I was English, and it was very attractive. I had a Beatle haircut. The Beatles were very popular. And
so what year was this?
This was 1966.
Okay, so right after the Beatles arrived.
Right, and so I was able to garnish a lot of interest because of being a Beatle type, and speaking like them and talking like them, and so the ladies liked that a lot, and so it was kind of nice. And I fit in quite well. I was voted to the court at high school, and we played. That's really where my love of American football started. We had, by amalgamating 3 high schools, we had an incredible football team, high school football team. We won the state championship in North Carolina 3 years in a row.
Wow!
And they actually wrote a book about us, and which was kind of neat. And that's where I really enjoyed getting to know, and that would lead to some other things that happened in my life. But,
wow! Yeah. Remember the Titans is one of my favorite movies, and that's a similar time period.
Very same
situation.
environment that we were in. Suddenly you had the 2 different coaches, the different players. But it was amazing how the coach at the time was very good at managing that, much like the coach in the Titans.
Right.
And, you had to do that because you had very good players. We had many of the players that played on those teams went on to the pros.
Wow. So I have to ask, did it bother you at all that you thought, or that the people in North Carolina thought you sounded like you were from Liverpool?
Well, I don't think they knew the difference, but no, I did not sound like I was from Liverpool.
Because that would be beneath you to sound like you were from Liverpool, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I figured.
Yeah, obviously, class structure in England is very different and very in place.
After high school, you went to the University of North Carolina.
At Chapel Hill.
Correct. Right?
Yes, I was offered a position at NC State as well, and I thought I'd do architecture there, but all my friends were going to Chapel Hill, so I ended up at Chapel Hill.
And how far away is Wilson from Chapel Hill?
It's about 45 minutes, an hour. The interesting thing there, though, if you remember back in 1969, that was the anti-war movement. So we had all the National Guard surrounded UNC because of the unrest. And in my freshman year, my first semester, I didn't take any finals. So all my classes, if you could get through one test or exam, that was your grade. Because what would happen is people would call in bomb threats, and you wouldn't take any exams. And people just, they'd vacate the buildings and nothing would happen. So it was a very different world. I mean, it was the time of Kent State and all the anti-war movement against Vietnam. And then it sort of began to quiet down in the spring, and then everything began to change. And by our junior year, life was very different. It was back to normal.
So still being fairly new to the country, what were your thoughts of watching and being in the middle of this revolutionary time in American history?
Well, it was a very exciting time. I mean, you saw a lot of different things going on. You had to, there's a fundamental difference between American culture and British culture. In England, you're honorable until you dishonor yourself. In other words, you
assume to be honorable.
Assume to be honorable.
Right.
Whereas in America, it's what have you done for me today? And I embraced that. That was that very competitive spirit. Though I was fortunate to be in the right socioeconomic group in England, but I loved the competitiveness of the American culture.
Right.
And I really enjoyed it, and I was fortunate to go to a good school at the University of North Carolina, and that's when I began to come to terms with much of who I was and, the difference, and began to enjoy and really take control of my own life, and did well.
Well, good. What did you do after you graduated?
I was very fortunate. I was... because I did have an international background. I got a job with Corning Glass International, and I was responsible for Middle East, Africa, and India sales. And that's a very different world. I mean, selling American products into the Middle East and Africa and so forth. And then I left Corning and I joined Ingersoll Rand, heavy equipment manufacturer. And that's when I did mechanical engineering. And then the awareness came to me that the world of mechanical engineering was over. And so I actually made the conscious decision to go to electronic engineering and joined AT&T. and went through all their training. We were very fortunate in those days. AT&T was becoming a company. It has been, deregulation had started, and they put you through significant training and pretty rigorous training for 3 years. It's like 2 master's degrees.
Wow.
And you have to pass all your tests within 10%. And it's when you're constantly under that pressure, you're watching people around you that just falling away. I mean, it was just a very competitive environment.
Right.
So I finished up. I was fortunate to be top of my class, and I enjoyed it and learning all about that new technology. And that's where my love of technology came from.
Right. And specifically in telecommunications at that
Correct.
point?
Yes. And data processing. You had to also, in the early years of programming, we actually ended up, our last classes were programming in C language at MIT. So I learned from that experience that that's not what I wanted to do in life.
Okay. But you were with AT&T, and then was it Earthlink after that?
Yes.
For a good number of years altogether, right?
Yes. Actually, Earthlink was in the today's world of a company called Deltacom.
Okay, right.
And I helped build that company. I was brought in to help build that company as a startup, and that was very exciting. And we actually won the state contract for telecommunications from AT&T. That was my claim to fame there, and was very successful with Deltacom.
And then you left that industry to be CEO and managing partner of a capital venture firm, right?
Correct. It was something that I'd always thought I'd wanted to do, and I was involved with that for a time. And though we did some startups, it's a very different world. Then I decided to get back into telecommunications, and I was very fortunate to be asked to head up the state of Florida Division of Communications, part of Department of Management Services,
right?
Which in essence, you're running the state of Florida telephone company,
right?
Because you do all the data processing, the telecommunications, first responders, the emergency management services for all city, county government throughout the entire state.
Wow. All right, I want to take a break for a minute from the resume and talk about the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
As this is going on kind of at the same time, right? It's your involvement with that organization. So it looks like you dedicated a large part of your adult life to the program and have served in a variety of capacities and leadership roles. Why are the Boy Scouts so important to you, and why have you committed so much of your time to serving that organization?
In England, when I was there, they have a program called the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and it's a sort of on the same line. Obviously, the Boy Scouts was started by Baden-Powell in London, and but I did the Duke of Edinburgh. It's more of a high-end sort of outdoor achievement. You have to do a lot of camping and so forth, and I had gone through that program. And then when I did do Boy Scouts in Trinidad, but Cub Scouts, but I didn't get that far. But when I came here, and I now had 2 sons, I wanted them and my daughter, and I wanted to have them be a part of it. So I became very interested in the Boy Scouts, very active in it. I was very fortunate to be a part of Troop 109 with Tim Hunt, and we had a tremendous opportunity to help people, and I thoroughly enjoyed raising children. I mean, I've raised a lot of children in my life, a lot of boys, and we took 61 boys to Eagle, which is pretty significant. And then I went on to be president of the Swanee River Area Council. Mm-hmm. At the time, it was in significant debt, and it needed a little tender, loving care. And over 6 years, I built that back up so that we got a new building. We got on Thomasville Road. We brought a lot of facilities to be built at Camp Wallwood, and we really changed the trajectory of the program to where we were very successful and a profitable organization.
What do you take most from all those years of working with boys and taking them through a program like that?
Well, the wonderful thing about raising children is if you will treat them with respect and be firm with them and love them and care for them, they will walk through the fire for you. And it was very interesting over the years. That's the way I operated. If your child stepped into my firing, and in other words, come camping,
right,
they live by my rules. And it was very interesting to watch how parents would say to me, well, how come our son will do what you say? And I said, well, first of all, you got to learn to love them and care for them. And they got to know you're being honest to them. And so, yes, and, it's wonderful. Even today I have kids doing, and even in high school, they would drive up in their truck and roll the window down and say, Mr. Campbell, I want you to meet my girlfriend. So, you built that relationship.
Right.
And watching kids grow and learn. And then I went on to do the same thing for adult scouting. Baden-Powell in 1919 started a program, which is an Eagle project, an Eagle equivalent for adults. It's called Wood Badge. And I began teaching that course. I took it and then taught it and became the course director.
Both my sons-in-law are Eagle Scouts.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
So I am not needed for tying knots or starting fires or anything like that. They've got all that covered.
Yeah. And I was very fortunate because of what I did. I did get the Silver Beaver Award, which is the highest award locally, and then the Silver Antelope, which is the highest award volunteers get within the Boy Scouts. So, and then there's another one. It's called God and Country, Your Service to Church, which was my faith has been a very critical part of my life, and I was very honored to get the St. George Award for service to youth within my church.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that for a second. You were a founding member of St. Peter's Cathedral, correct?
Right. We left the Episcopal Church to form the Anglican Church of North America, and St. Peter's is now the cathedral for this area. And so that entity is what we helped start, and been very involved with that program. It's a wonderful thing, and it's been a major part of my life, and I serve at the church too.
When you say we, who are you talking about?
Well, Tina and I, my wife, who's been, I was very blessed to meet her. She's from Pensacola, Florida, 6th generation Floridian, which is a rare breed, and she helped me change from being this stodgy Englishman to more like being an American where you share feelings and you care and you emote and so forth.
Was that an easy transition for you?
It took me a while. She was very rigorous at making sure that I made that transition.
Right.
She got me very involved with community activities. We did a lot of that together. One of the interesting things we did together is that we had been involved with the British Olympic team, and then we also did the managing a NASCAR team. Right. I started Campbell Group International in 1996, really so that I could facilitate my activities in sports, and have kept it going for consulting purposes over the years. Obviously, it's become important more at certain times, and then today I have it very active, and that's really the company I work for today.
Okay. All right. Well, you brought up sports, and that's where I want to go next, because that's a big area of interest for me. I read that in 1994 you developed a website for the British Olympic team.
Before we get to that website, because let me do the premise. Tina worked, was the vice president with the chamber, and we had the Sports Authority.
Right.
The goal of the Sports Authority was to bring major sports events.
We're talking about Tallahassee.
Right. And we'd bring major sports event from economic development, because obviously what we did was tourism. And if you brought whenever you had a big sporting event, you have about 2.5 to 3 people that come to town, and hotel rooms, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so we had been doing that, and then the 1996 games in Atlanta, the Centennial Games, were looming up.
Right.
And so our goal was to get at least one team to train for the 96 game. Why was that important? Because the games were being held the last week in July and the first week in August. Heat and humidity is a primary issue for these temperate climate countries, right? And so fortunately I was asked to be on an economic program, communications group, to go with AT&T to England right about that time. And I had the pleasure of meeting up with the British Olympic Association and the British Track and Field organizations that typically don't get on too well, because track and field in Europe is a big deal. And fortunately, we put together a package, and we convinced them that to consider Tallahassee rather than Georgia. And so they put a bid out for Athens, Georgia, Chapel Hill, Raleigh area, Durham, and Tallahassee. Those were
Right.
the final three. And they brought in a team, and we showed them did all kinds of crazy things. But the key thing that we did, I did a evaluation of the temperature and weather conditions for the last 10 years before that. And we could deliver the same conditions as those 2 weeks, August, September,
Earlier.
for 9 months out of the year.
Wow.
And so what our slogan was...
Normally that's not a big selling point for people coming
the
here.
thing that's really important to understand is that in Tallahassee, we have the finest heat and humidity in the South. And they bought it, and they came, and we got 21 of the 24 teams that they took to Atlanta.
That's
and
amazing.
we built the facilities, put together the facilities. We were blessed to have a fantastic relationship with Florida State University, Florida A&M, all the local communities, the biking communities, the wrestling communities, the boxing communities. And then the other aspect was massage therapy, which was a big deal in Olympic sports.
Right.
So they came, and they trained here for 4 years. We had an incredible number of athletes.
For how long?
For 4 years. They selected us in 96.
4 years?
4 years of training.
Wow.
Off
I didn't
and
remember
on.
that.
Yeah, off and on. The teams would come, and as we got closer to the games, they came more and more.
Okay.
And that formula is very important. For what we did, we were fortunate to be able to contact Buckingham Palace, and Princess Anne made a decision to come. And the day before the games started in Atlanta, she was flown in on a private jet, and I got to spend the day with her, taking her to all the venues and meeting the players, the athletes. Very exciting time. Very exciting time.
And so, getting back to the website, you did
the website
is part of that,
right? The idea was to be able to sell branded material, clothing, right? Well, for most people, they don't realize that the Olympic rings look the same, and they are the same in every single country. But you're not allowed to sell any kind of Olympic gear in America other than American Olympic gear. We got a waiver. We had a good relationship with the American Olympic Association. And so when we opened that, they agreed to let us to sell British Olympic branded materials on that website. And that was very significant.
All right. So in addition to the work with the Olympics, you also were involved in managing marketing and sponsorships for a NASCAR team. So
Correct.
How did you get involved with NASCAR?
I had a friend that I went to Chapel Hill with, and he was the lawyer for a team in Asheville, North Carolina. And they had a team, but it never really got better than 17th position. And in NASCAR, the difference between first place and the 44th car is seconds, not a time.
Right.
And he asked me to come up and help them with their sponsorship. And so Tina and I took on the opportunity to use our knowledge that we had learned from the Olympics to help them with their sponsorship. Along the way, having worked with all these athletes, just little things that we could help them with that would make a huge difference. For instance, whenever you jump, you always jump off the same foot, okay? Well, when you go over the wall to change a tire, you're talking seconds.
Right.
And if you go off the wall on the wrong foot, the body will change and put you on the right foot. You've now lost a second. Every second is one position back as you go back on the track. How do you minimize the time it takes to change tires and get the cars ready? We helped them get the sponsorship. We did that when we thought we had got a major victory, and Tina had spent a lot of time cultivating, and we really felt that we had convinced Pepsi to sponsor our teams. Our number was 1, and they wanted the number 1. And the vice president called Tina and said, I got to tell you, we can't go through with the deal. But when you hear what we have, you'll understand. And she hung up very disappointed, and she told me, I said, well, there's only one person that would make that difference. And I said, Jeff Gordon. And he was a Coca-Cola sponsor. And yes, they had convinced him to move from Coca-Cola to Pepsi. That was an exciting time. I mean, it's such a tremendous, you fly into the different venues, and you're inside that area, and you're working with the teams, and it's just a wonderful experience. But it's not conducive to raising 3 kids, so that's when we left that industry.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Just a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by Fiore Communications. Just like people, every business has a story to tell, and we've been helping our clients tell their story since 2001, because who you are as a company is just as important as what you do. To learn more about how telling your story can make a difference in your business, visit FioreCommunications.com. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. Now we get to one of the most interesting parts for me as a huge sports fan, especially football fan. You were and are still a member of the Tallahassee Quarterback Club, and I believe you founded the foundation too. Tell me about the origins of the Bolitnikov Award and how all that happened.
That's a great question, and I thoroughly enjoy talking about it. But bottom line, over the years, from my time in high school where we played football, I had a tremendous interest in college football and football in general. And I was watching Charlie Ward get his Heisman. For those that don't know, Charlie Ward was at Florida State University and won the Heisman. And it suddenly occurred to me, as I listened to him getting the award and having listened to the college football award show 3 days before, having looked at the sport and understanding that there was no award for the wide receivers. As I said, there is 7 positions in college football. And indeed, as I looked through the history from the very first pass that occurred between Dartmouth and Yale in 1887, the quarterback was falling and threw the ball, and it was caught and went for a touchdown, and then the ref said, well, there's no rule against it, and that's how
Nobody had thought to throw the ball.
Nobody had thought to throw it.
Right.
And so it wasn't outlawed. So I then looked at 2 things. Who would you give the award to? So I did the research on who had the best statistics in college football. And as you go through and look at the history up until that date, 1994, 93, that time period, it came to be evident that Fred Bolitnikov, who was from Erie, Pennsylvania, a very successful athlete, had led it in 5 sports in high school, and he played for Florida State University. And his statistics were the very best at the time. That's who I eventually decided that would be the person that we would name the award after.
Mm-hmm. And he also had a great pro career with the Raiders.
Right, and that's what being a marketing person, that was one aspect. That's a great observation on your part, is that I didn't pick up on that. And so after we created the award, I called him and got to know him. I had to talk to the Raiders organization to allow me to talk to him. Mm-hmm. Yes, he had a very successful pro career. But so then you had to create a trophy. And if you look at each of the 7 positions, there's a specific stance that depict, if you look at a quarterback, the way they stand, the quarterback award looks like that. Look at the running back. And the key position for a receiver is a sideline pass. And so we created that award, the figurine, to look that way. And it was kind of interesting is that we had nobody that did figurines in Tallahassee. The only person I could do it was a world-renowned duck decoy person that did decoys for ducks.
Right.
And he did the first mold. Obviously, it had some issues, but we had a very fortunate that we knew one of the people in town that did trophies, and they were able to get the clay model to the company in Chicago, Lewis, that does all the Emmys, Oscars, and MTV awards and so forth, and they do all those things. And so that model was then sent to Chicago, and then we wanted a blank to really stand out, and so we have Philippine marble, which is the finest marble in the world, and that's the blank that it goes in. The Bolitnikov Award is the heaviest award of all of them.
So tell me about the impact that the award, the first year you actually gave it on air on ESPN at the awards ceremony, right, with the other awards?
Right. From the day I saw Charlie Ward get his Heisman, 11 months and 8 days later, we had created the award, put in place the committee to do the selection.
And what about the impact on the Tallahassee Quarterback Club and having that kind of prestige associated with the organization here in town?
Well, the Quarterback Club, we then founded the foundation. It's really the foundation that does the award. It's very significant what has happened. Over the years, it has been very highly received. What has then been added is scholarships that they give to very individual, unique individuals in the high school level. Right. And they get a scholarship is just incredible. So it's really been very, very successful. And the key thing to understand about it is you don't create an award by yourself. You have a tremendous team that you build around you. And over the years, many people have been involved, and it's changed the life for so many people, not just the players, but the folks that have been in part of it.
Right. I know another passion in your life is Rotary International, and you've been a member of Rotary, a Rotarian, for many years now. And we're both members of the Sunrise Club here in Tallahassee. So tell me why Rotary is important to you and the role of that organization in your life.
Rotary, when I joined, I was asked to join in Pensacola, and I joined that club. And part of what I think is key to the American society is that you're giving back. I'd done that with the Boy Scouts, and now in Rotary represented a way of giving back to all that you had been blessed with. And being a part of Rotary is that you can serve the community, participate in making life better for other people. Mm-hmm. And so I made a decision that I would, if I did one thing well, I would do Rotary well. The attendance is a real critical thing to me. So being a part of first the Rotary Club of Pensacola, then the downtown, and now the Sunrise. The joy of Sunrise is what makes the difference.
So the number I saw was 33 years of perfect attendance. Is that streak still intact?
Yeah, it's a little longer now. Yes.
Yeah.
It's very important that and that's what it's about.
And that, for people who don't know, that's a weekly meeting.
It's a weekly meeting.
Right. So that's a lot of meetings.
Yeah, and you can make up. You don't. People think you got to go to your club every time.
Right.
You can make up at other clubs. And what the advantage of that is, you can get to go to other clubs and meet people and build friendships all over the place.
Right. I want to talk about one more thing and then the last two questions. We've talked about your wife, Tina, some, and you've mentioned your children, but just tell me a little bit about your boys and your daughter. Just tell us a little bit about them.
Well, Tina has been a major part of my life, obviously. We've been working on 43 years together. She has made a huge difference in who I am and what I'm about. And she's director of parish life for St. Peter's and runs that part of it. I have my oldest son, Barrett. They all three went to Leon, and he went on to the University of Virginia and had a very successful career and is currently with Google as in the CFO area. My second son, Fleming, went to the University of Florida, and then he decided to learn Arabic, and so he went to Pez University, and then to Jordan, and learned Arabic, live and in color.
Wow!
And then he was recruited and got a scholarship for the federal government, and they sent him back to learn again. And then he went into Iraq and was in theater, building and managing the building of bases during the war. And he's now left that, obviously, and is now back, and he works for a company called Aristotle, and he manages PACs. And my daughter, Caroline, went to Leon and then went on to University of Alabama. Mm-hmm. She was selected as a capstone person, which is a select group of students that represent the president. She is in Washington and works for a high-end wealth management firm.
Okay.
And is about to get married in a few months.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll be fun. All right, two more questions and then we're done. Christopher, looking back, what is one thing or person that you would say altered the trajectory of your life to this point?
One of the major things that changed my trajectory was my constant changing and learning to live in a world of change. By the time I graduated from Florida State University with my MBA, I had been to 15 schools in my life in multiple countries. I've traveled all over the world, been to 55 different countries, and that ability to deal with change, deal with different cultures, live in a society that is always changing, and being able to help people understand change in technology and other things has always been a key factor in my life, and had a lot of people along the way that were encouraging. Obviously, at different times, life was good, and you had some challenges. Every time you move from one place to another, there's always challenging. But
Sure.
just being able to help other people and to watch learning take place, whether it's in an adult or in a youth or in friends, is just helping people move forward. And then the key to give back. And that's why I've participated in so many different civic organizations, because I feel that I've been blessed. The Lord's been good to me, so my impetus is to share.
That's great. All right, final question. The podcast is named How I Got Here, and we've talked about how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years from now?
I continue to look at how I can be involved in new technology and understand the changes in society. I have all intentions to continue to work. I consult today. I do think that I want to look more at how I can be more interactive on my own terms rather than obviously being a part of a corporation. I run my own company today, which gives me the flexibility to move around. In 3 to 5 years, I see that I'm going to find new opportunities, see new technologies, new worlds, and I think that's very critical for what I'm about, and being able to move forward and be successful in those new endeavors.
So you don't see yourself slowing down anytime soon?
No, I have no intention to slow down. I try to exercise and keep fit, and that's just never crossed my mind.
That was Christopher Campbell, a great role model for using your gifts and resources to make a difference in every way possible. Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.